over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Bernardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Bernardo wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Bernardo could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Bernardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Bernardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Bernardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? That had been his mistake before, not trusting Zenobia's feelings for him. But how could he have known, after all these years of silence?
Why would anyone put his slinky collection in a strongbox, thought Bernardo. Are they magic slinkies? Oh, and there was something else. good night, Gracie, said Renato, wondering who Gracie was.
Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Renato asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things, and he could never figure out why he'd done them. Usually, they worked out. After all, he was a hero. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? Couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? Anyone ever tell you have a lovely eye? No? Renato wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Swordfu School was closed now. But he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She vanished. And he suddenly noticed he couldn't move except his mouth. In fact, soon he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He told Zenobia everything. Skyripper, the Iblistone, even where the secret rebel base was, until he was hoarse. It was some kind of truth spell. A talky truth spell. She called her father by Farspeaker Toad and filled His Majesty in. But why didn't he get the core? Croaked the Farspeaker in something like His Majesty's croak. Because I missed you, darling. Renato grinned. He doesn't even know why, frowned Zenobia. That makes no sense. It's a trap, shouted the Emperor. I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators. If Renato came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father. You're lying, she said. Somehow you're lying. The spell hadn't worn off yet. He had to tell the truth. The trick was in making sure she wouldn't believe it. The core is perfectly safe, he said. And he tried his hardest to sound sincere. So is the Iblistone. In fact, I was trying to get them myself. Fine then, interrogators it is, she said angrily. I gave you a chance. The Emperor's interrogators were not especially gentle, even by Weasel standards. Fortunately, Zenobia had locked him in the guest quarters on her ship, and she'd forgotten it had a toilet that, like all skyship toilets, could be vented into the abyss. This was not the sort of slippery fox he wanted to be. But just as they were about to land, he threw the latch, wrinkled his nose, and leapt through the open latrine. It was a short, safe landing. At least this part of the Nexus hadn't changed too much. Zenobia had been taking him to the Imperial outpost. She'd never expect him to go there by himself. Well, maybe she would. You never knew with her. Renato knew Zenobia, and Zenobia knew him. She'd suspected a trick. Now he'd vanished. She would probably guess that was his plan all along. Perfect. Maybe she wouldn't use the Skyripper. At least not without taking it to the scientists at the observatory first. Meanwhile, the Emperor would be coming to the outpost personally. This could be good. Reynardo was face to face with the Emperor's bodyguard. They looked very tough, but the Emperor held them back.
Oh, where's my daughter?
And how would I know that? Reynardo grinned at him.
She lured me here so that you could kill me, didn't she?
Ah, don't be ridiculous, said Reynardo, trying his best to sound convincing. She loves you.
Oh, I knew it. The rabbit told me I couldn't trust her.
The Emperor hopped out the door. His phalanx of bodyguards retreated carefully. Reynardo heard someone call, "Arrest her!" as they left. Well, that's a job well done, thought Reynardo. Now the fleet will be in all sorts of disarray. But maybe he could find her in the mountains. She always used to go to the mountains to hide from the world. Maybe he could even turn her against her father. Or maybe he could reap the benefits of the chaos he had sown. It was time to report to the Rebel Council, and then launch the attack on a divided and very confused Imperial fleet. Reynardo felt very clever indeed. He'd told the Empire nothing but the truth, and now they suspected everything and everyone. So, why are you going to see Zenobia? He asked himself. It's not just a gloat, is it? No, of course not. Not turning her against her father was good. It was very good. If she would actually join the rebels, that would be spectacular, right? Well, that was definitely what he was doing. He wondered if he should have just told her the truth about her father. The Emperor had adopted her from a stray. That was the source of all her loyalty. But even then, he'd been dreaming of a bargain with the lost gods. They alone could make him immortal. The Emperor would have to seal that bargain with the life of someone who truly loved him. And who else truly loved the Emperor? But how could Reynardo tell her that now? Why would she ever believe him? The funny thing was, she should have trusted him. He told her the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Oh, all right. The truth was, he'd played her like a fiddle. And how often had he ever done that? She was so smart. Smarter than him, really.
cannon trap. Who doesn't love being shot by cannons? And who kept these things loaded anyway? Renato had given away the location of the secret base. Fortunately, the Emperor thought it was all a trap. He even mistrusted his own daughter. Renato couldn't have done better if he'd planned it. What have you done to me? Zenobia demanded. My own father thinks I'm a traitor. So? But I'm loyal. So what? You're a bastard, Renato, she said. Now you love that about me. You really did want the core, didn't you? And the Iblis stone. Yep. He gloated. You get all that? She said to the far speaker toad he'd failed to spot.
I am so relieved, my daughter,
said the far speaker. And Zenobia got into her ship and flew off. Damn it. The old far speaker trick. How had he missed it? This was very bad. Zenobia back in her father's good graces, and both of them ready to use the core and the Iblis stone. He got back on the Farfarer. Briefly, Renato thought of fleeing. The odds were surely against him. Never tell me the odds, he told himself. Odds confused him. He preferred to trust his gut. And so he sailed on to attack the fleet. Alone, if necessary. There were not many rebels here, and they were disorganized. The Empire had obviously attacked the secret base, the formerly secret base whose location Renato had so helpfully pinpointed on a map. There was still time to turn around, wasn't there? But Renato hated turning around. Heroes don't turn around, they just own their screw-ups and turn them into impossible victories, right? Renato's personal battle was going fairly well. The Ravens immediately in front of him were no quicker or tougher than usual. Where was the power of the core? Blasting him off into the abyss. And where was Zenobia? She must be up to something. But whatever it wasn't his problem. Not yet, anyway. It was all going surprisingly well.
Blood pumping like a bit of killing.
At last, he came to Zenobia and the Emperor. She was sealing up a kind of squat coffin, banded with lead.
So glad you're here.
Croaked the Emperor.
You will be witness to my final victory.
That's creepy, Dad, said Zenobia. But thank you. Because of your shenanigans, we tested the core. It's really unstable. It could have blown us all up. It could, said Renato, a little frustrated that she'd figured it out. Anyway, we already destroyed your secret base, so we don't need a super weapon. We're just going to bury it. Do we, torture you? Or give you a medal? Sometime later, Renato got an invitation to attend the Emperor's ritual sacrifice of his daughter. They took him out of his dungeon cell and gave him all his medals to wear. A little while after that, the lost gods returned, and the sun went black, and the Emperor ate his soul.
Oh, again?
But he already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lapino. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again, faster than before, and he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lapino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy, and that he had a clever plan. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Or so Lapino had told him over the far speaker anyway. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Reynardo had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the Raven's call about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice. Lapino would betray him. But now Reynardo knew that. What would Lapino do if he knew that Lapino was going to betray him? Well, he'd concoct some crazy scheme, wouldn't he? That used Lapino's betrayal against him, and it would blow up in his face. Yeah. Maybe he was overthinking this. Dirty and bloody, Reynardo finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Reynardo recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The Ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia.
We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who happened to also be a deadly sorcerer, and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. And it would be nice to see her. He'd always had a soft spot for her. And he felt sure she had one for him. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. Zenobia wasn't just the Emperor's daughter, of course. She'd been Reynardo's best friend in Swordfu school. And you're still mad for her, the rabbit reminded him. The rabbit had a point, and Reynardo had a feeling she'd want to see him again. Who knows what could happen between the two of them this time around? She knows all his plans, chuckled the master spy. She won't give them up easily. She'll tell the interrogators, all right, said Lapino. Taking her would change the game, all right. The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Could he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty. Why was Lupino urging him to capture Zenobia? Obviously it was a trap. But you never knew how Lupino thought. Sometimes his plans were so convoluted they did the exact opposite to what Lupino wanted. There must be some way to play on that, Renato thought.
Boy, the looks could kill.
So, what's this plan of yours?
Use me as bait, said Lupino. And he outlined a slightly complicated plan that involved geese, a net, setting the Farfarer a little bit on fire, Lupino dressing as an old blind toad, and Renato hiding inside a monstrous watermelon.
What could possibly go wrong? Thought Renato.
Oh, this is gonna be fun,
Said Lupino, as he ran to go set up his marvelous plan.
Now you're foxed.
Renato felt dubious about the whole plan. With every step, he was waiting for it all to go horribly wrong. But against all odds, Lupino's idiotic plan worked. Zenobia's ravens ran off after the geese, the net dropped, and Renato jumped out of the watermelon and put his sword to Zenobia's throat.
Renato, she said. Are those new scars? They look good on you. You never return my velvet jacket. It was my favorite. You look stupid in velvet. Ah, what does an imperial princess know about style?
Oh, get a room, you two,
Said Lupino, probably sensing the chemistry.
But the fleet was coming on fast, so they took Zenobia east, over the Nexus. She'd vanished from Swordfu School, from his life, without even saying goodbye, without ever telling him she was the Emperor's adopted daughter.
Renato was aware of her feelings. Maybe this was a bad idea, but was he letting his own feelings get the better of him?
Ah, Lupino was right, Renato thought reluctantly. She knows things. She recognized his look. You're taking me to the interrogators, aren't you? She said, wide-eyed. And then she jumped, with horror. Renato saw Zenobia plummeting. Then he saw the Nexus below them.
cats always land on their feet.
Ah, she'll head for the Imperial outpost, yelled Lapino. You have to catch her.
Cats can run faster, but foxes can run longer. If he ran, he could head her off before she reached her minions at the outpost. Well, he did love a good chase. He was closing on her. He could smell her fear. He tried not to think about the interrogators at the secret base. What did they do to her? Maybe it didn't have to end that way. Maybe he could talk to her. But, after all, there were worse things the Imperials had done to friends of his. Bernardo reached the outpost. The Imperials there were no match for him. Soon after, Zenobia limped up the path. When she realized he was already in front of her, she didn't even try to run. Oh, you left without saying goodbye. Again, he said, "Please, I'm enjoying this a little too much," she said, shaken. "Oh, spare us the chit-chat, would you?" said Lapino as he shackled her hands so she couldn't throw spells. She knows all his plans. All the way back to the Farfarer, Lapino nagged Bernardo about how the interrogators would pry all the intel out of Zenobia. How that would turn the tides in the imminent battle. All they had to do was take her to the rebels' secret base. Bernardo didn't like to think about what the interrogators would do to her. Couldn't he just talk to her? As they reached the ruins, Bernardo could see ravens everywhere, searching for the rebel base. They'd have to hide the Farfarer or go on foot. "What if we get separated?" asked Lapino, for once thinking ahead. "I'll show you a map to the base," Bernardo told Lapino. "Bernardo, don't do this," said Zenobia. "We were friends once. We..." "Shut it, witch, or I'll shackle your mouth too," said Lapino. See? Bernardo thought. There was no way Lapino was working for the Empire. He really hated Zenobia. And then, a few moments later, they touched down. As Lupino pulled Zenobia off the Farfarer, Renato readied himself for the battle ahead.
I'm sorry I nicked your jacket, she said. It's just... Oh, God. It's stupid, but... It smelled like you.
What? He said, confused. Then... Why didn't you ride? Why didn't you far speak?
Oh, save the romantic nostalgia. Let's go! Shrieked Lupino.
So Renato launched himself down the path to the secret base. Renato thought about Hypatia's kid. Poor, dumb Peter. Cut down by a goggler. He wondered if Peter had known he was protecting the Book of Destinies. Or was he just another brave kid, making his mummy proud? Already, Renato had misgivings. It had been Lupino's idea to capture Zenobia. Lupino who'd guessed she'd run to the outpost. There was something wrong with the way none of Lupino's plans had gone wrong yet. It wasn't like him.
They caught their breath. It's beautiful, she said, looking at the ruins. This used to be the library of Ubar, he said, before your father's ravens smashed it. Do we have to talk politics? She asked. That's not how I want to remember you, she said with an odd, wistful look at her face. She was as beautiful as she'd ever been, and as brave. Lupino huffed. They got back on the trail.
Two eyes good. One eye dead. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. As they made their way to the secret rebel base, Renato felt strange. Zenobia was his prisoner, yet somehow she felt more like an old friend. He wanted to tell her all his secrets, but suddenly the ruins lit up with thousands of fireworks.
There was a thunderous roar and dust rose. The caves were collapsing.
The caves.
You've been playing me? Renato said, and he stared at Zenobia.
I'm sorry, she said, and she seemed almost embarrassed. Then, everything went dark.
When Renato came to, he had a terrible headache. Also, Zenobia's sword was at his throat. And her shackles were gone. So was Lupino. The terrible thing is, he said, I really have missed you. Now that we've destroyed the rebellion, would you consider becoming an advisor to the Emperor's daughter?
I'm no one's servant. Everybody serves. Even if it's only destiny. I like to choose my own destinies, he said.
The whole point of a destiny is you can't choose. Oh, never mind, she said. Look, if I see you again, I'll have to kill you.
He watched her ship soar away. He would see her again, he decided. Even if he had to fight his way across the entire fleet.
The Imperial fleet was cleaning up the few rebel remnants. For only a moment, he thought about running.
But heroes don't run, even when the world is against them. Even when their cause is hopeless, and their efforts futile, and pointless, and useless, and death painful and guaranteed. He's decided to stop thinking for a while.
Who's your next of kin? Just wondering.
Renato's arm was sore, his armor wet with raven blood. He was tired of death. But death was not yet tired of him. The rebels were losing. Badly. In some other universe, Renato thought, he and Zenobia had left Sword Fu School together. But not...
Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of it. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time.
At last, he reached the Emperor's ship. Zenobia was there. "Why'd you have to come back?" she said. "Guess I'm just serving my destiny." He shrugged. "You don't even know what that word means," she said. "Do you ever wonder if things have been different all the time?" she said, and drew her sword. In the end, Renato lay bleeding out on the deck. Zenobia sat by his side, upset. "What are you so upset about?" he asked. "You wouldn't understand. Why didn't you tell me you were going to leave school? I was afraid you'd convince me not to." "I guess I'll have to buy you a drink in the halls of the Valiant then," he told her, and then he was gone. Oh, again? But he already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lapino.